Let me come to you immediately. Of course, we're experiencing some technical difficulties, otherwise we should be interacting with Kampala. What was your immediate reaction when you learned about the sentencing of Jean-Pierre Bemba, a man, of course, I'm sure you know reasonably well?
What was my reaction? I welcome the decision that someone who is alleged to have been responsible for terrible human rights abuses in a fellow African state has been brought to account, that the victims had the opportunity to bring their grievances before a court of law and to get the truth about their suffering acknowledged. But at the same time, like many other people, I have misgivings about the ICC and the international criminal justice system that we've experienced these past 20 years. I can talk about them at length if you want.
I see. What particular misgivings do you have about the ICC?
My misgivings, while everyone applauds the efforts that have been made to reduce impunity and to hold perpetrators of atrocities accountable, the current international criminal justice system is not yet a credible justice mechanism. For one, the major powers of the world are exempt from this justice. Countries like the US, China, Russia, they're not even parties to the ICC Rome Treaty. They retain the freedom to invade other countries, and when there's conflict, there are terrible human rights abuses. But they wouldn't let the rest of the world hold them accountable for the conduct of the wars that they wage in other countries. So it's a justice system that targets abuses by the weak, but is nowhere near holding the powerful of this world accountable. Two, even among the weak, the poor countries, it's a justice system that holds people who are out of power, who have lost conflict, accountable, but perpetrators who are in power are again immune. One, their patrons, the big powers of the world, try to shield some of these perpetrators of atrocity from justice. For example, you recall that in 2010, there was a UN report, the mapping report, that talked of terrible atrocities that were committed against Rwandan refugees in the Congo in the 1990s. Why would you, don't you find it curious that that report came out and no effort whatsoever has been made to hold the people who are responsible for that violence accountable? The crimes that Bemba is accused of are nowhere comparable to the atrocities that were committed in Congo in the 1990s. But because the crimes that were committed in Congo in the 1990s were committed by governments that have patrons in the big powers, they've not been held accountable. So, and even if charges are brought against perpetrators who are still in power, they still have the resources to frustrate this kind of justice. They may either decide not to respond to the summons of the court, justify the court like Bashir has done, or frustrate judicial proceedings, as we have done, as we have seen the process work play out with regard to Kenya. How do you get somebody who is in charge of a state, has all the resources of a country like Kenya at his fingertips, is in charge of a police force that is responsible for extrajudicial killings of hundreds of people over the past 10 years or so, and you expect witnesses living in Kenya to come forward talk about his crimes, appear as witnesses against him in a court like the ICC. So this is it's not a futile process to have the ICC, but it's a very weak, it's like having a law enforcement system or a court system that is discredited. We need it. We cannot say we should not do without it, but it's nowhere near what we need. It's not a credible process.
Well, it was not supposed to be a primary court really as such. It was supposed to be complementary. Isn't that correct?
It was supposed to be complementary to hold people accountable whom national systems were unable or unwilling to bring to justice.
Precisely.
But then when, like the African countries, they believe these cases should be brought to an African court.
Right.
It will be, if it is ever established, it will be an African court whose judges are appointed by the very people against whom accusations of grave human rights abuses are brought.
And probably who would be influenced or, in a sense, compromised.
Absolutely.
But what about the ICC itself? Can it really pull it off in a country that is not willing to cooperate with it?
I'll give an example. Like with regard to the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, the court that tries the Rwanda genocide cases. In practice, it was nearly impossible for the court to secure the cooperation of state without the support of the United States. So I don't see any court being able to get the cooperation of most states without the support of the United States and to some extent the European Union, the major powers of the world.
Very interesting, very interesting.